thought I'd do a quick video about yesterday's speech by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president, to the UK Parliament. I believe it's the first time a speech by a foreign leader has ever been given in Parliament in that way. Not just in that way, it's unprecedented. But of course this was done from Kiev, in a city where the president there, Zelenskyy, is under fire. Clearly the place is being attacked, and he's vowed not to leave the city, so of course he did this speech over electronic communications, and they'd specifically brought in lots of television screens and so on so everybody could see, and it was a very powerful speech. And what amazes me is that Zelenskyy, despite coordinating the defence of his country, and he's been going around all the world leaders, it seems, talking to all of them, doing speeches to all of the leaders and their parliaments and so on, to try and drum up international support for Ukraine. And clearly he's working, he is winning this information war. But it's remarkable, really, that he took the time to specifically write a speech for British people who, if they know anything about British history, would have really got this speech. Now, look, he may have a speechwriter. I don't think so, though, because obviously, as we know, he used to be an actor and a comedian, and that's how he became famous. And he wrote all of that himself. The comedy series where, ironically, he became president in the series, he wrote all that himself. And I suspect he wrote this speech himself as well. And clearly, this is a man that knows his history. So, just going through the speech initially, I thought it was excellent, a brilliant speech. He took everybody through what's happened from day 1 through to day 14. Quickly, briefly, not taking too long, but stating on each day what happened, and always highlighting the humanitarian catastrophes and the victories for Ukraine and the tragedies. Excuse me. So he walked us through the progress of the war. And then he referenced Shakespeare. And he talked about Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, and his famous soliloquy about to be or not to be, which is probably the most famous soliloquy in the British language, famously done by Laurence Olivier, at least in my favourite version, and asking the question, we're asking this to be or not to be, as in, should we capitulate, should we not, should we take up arms against the aggressor? And of course he says our decision is to be, and that's what they're doing, they're taking up arms. But then, even better, he went on to quote Churchill's very famous speech, the Fight Them on the Beaches speech. And he sort of paraphrased it, he adjusted it, because we're not talking about fighting on the beaches in Ukraine, but he said we're fighting on the rivers, and we're fighting in the landing ground, in the trees and the fields, and we'll never surrender. And this is someone that clearly has a grasp of world history, and it was a very powerful speech, slightly messed up by the translation. It seems they just can't find a decent translator to translate immediately from Ukrainian into English, and considering this was in the Houses of Parliament, you think they would get someone that can actually do the job. One of the problems is, though, that translators keep getting upset because Zelenskyy's words are so powerful and his presentation is so powerful that number of times now the translators have got choked up translating it. It's quite remarkable, really. And certainly the standing ovation that he received and the applause and everything, there's a lot of respect for this guy. And I've got a lot of respect for him too. I know that some people are branding him just a puppet of the West and all this stuff. I don't really know. I mean, if you look back at his career, he's clearly been a very dedicated, very driven man, and very talented as an artist. And it's quite ironic, really, isn't it? It was Oscar Wilde, I believe, who first put forward the hypothesis of life imitating art, as opposed to the reverse. And that's kind of what's happened with his career, being a left field candidate, but popular. And he's been powerful. It does seem that he's eliminated corruption. And as well, interestingly, even the former corrupt president who lost to him is now wandering about, I believe it's Kiev, military body armour and camouflage with an AK. And he's actually, they say in Ukraine, he's done the impossible, that he's actually been able to unite himself and the former president. Was it Poroshenko, I think his name is? Now, the one thing we do come to, he said that he's not going to leave Kiev under any circumstances. We know that Kiev, it could potentially be surrounded. We know that there's a large armoured column glacially slow in its progress, moving southward to the west of Ukraine. From the east, they're coming round. There's still an escape sort of from the southwest, but they're putting up a valiant defence. Why is it moving glacially slow? It would just appear that they don't have logistics. There's also the Rasputitsa, which is the roadlessness, I believe, in translation, and that's what's happening at the moment, where the ground is thawed. It's not cold enough to be frozen, but it's not dry enough to be hard through dryness. So you can't go off-road, basically. Even in tracked vehicles, they're getting bogged down in this really sticky mud. And certainly all of these, many of the vehicles are logistics vehicles that are wheeled as opposed to tracked, and they just can't go off the road. They haven't been put under air attack for reasons I've talked about before. However, they have an awful lot now. They've been sent, I forget the number, but it's literally, I think it was 10,000 Javelin anti-tank missiles, which are even better than Milan's. They're the American one. And these things are excellent. And so I imagine they're getting attacked from the sides, but it's not easy because clearly the Russians are spreading out infantry either side trying to protect them from these attacks. But it does appear it's being selected for that reason. But probably the main reason, actually, is that the Russians just don't have enough logistics vehicles. They don't have enough tankers to move around fuel, to move around water. I've been watching a channel called The Enforcer. He goes into all the maths of this as best we can, because obviously information is not necessarily reliable, what you find online, because most of this is military secrets. But he reckons for one BTG, one battalion tactical group, which is sort of like 800 men probably, you need 8 tankers of fuel and possibly one of water. And so it's interesting. A lot of these, and then as well, as part of that, stacking in some ammo and bits and bobs and food. But he reckons per day you need 8 either heavy vehicles and tankers. And it's interesting that whenever we see videos of the Ukrainians knocking out a logistics column, of which they seem to have done quite often, it does usually seem to be roughly 8 logistics vehicles as part of that. So I think his estimate is probably on the money there, that one BTG does require about 8 vehicles per day to keep it moving. And the problem is, if you multiply it up, the Russians don't have enough. So although they have well over 100 BTGs in operation, but they don't have logistics vehicles. And so my suspicion with this supply column is that they don't have the fuel probably to keep the supply column itself going, and also the troops defending it and so on. But as well, they're probably amassing for a big assault over the coming day or two, because obviously before an attack you don't just go straight in there. You build up massive supplies beforehand, and that is also what it would appear that they're doing. So it may be, if you look at the range of these vehicles, it's about 20-mile sort of range that most of these tanks have. And so they appear to possibly just be stopping north of Kiev to build up a massive supply and reserve depot. So that's also possible, but I'm sure they're not doing it easily. I'm sure they're facing all kinds of problems of getting up the fuel and the ammo and the food and the water and all the rest of it. But when the inevitable attack comes, and it will come, if Kiev is indeed encircled, I've got a question. People are saying that Volodymyr Zelenskyy is on a hit list along with Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, that these are going to be eliminated by Russian death squads if possible. I'm sure if Putin does that, it will just absolutely condemn him in all of the national or the international press and everything else. I mean, his popularity is at an all-time low. Now, if he kills this charismatic leader that the whole world is fawning over, you know, what's going to happen to his popularity? Interesting, the Ukrainians don't seem to have any qualms about killing generals. It seems they've killed 3 Russian generals already, which is remarkable. You know, this is quite a remarkable thing to happen. But anyway, so that would be the next question. If Kiev is encircled, I don't think Zelenskyy will run. And if it goes into bloody street fighting and they get, you know, eventually wherever he is, I mean, he keeps popping up every day, different places here and there, always with his, you know, looking spick and span, dressed in, you know, camouflage, or at least, you know, roughly kind of khaki type clothes. And he keeps appearing all over the place, showing he's very much alive and hasn't fled. If they do capture him, well, I can see this dude going out, you know, fighting, to be honest. But what do I know? But we'll have to wait and see. It's quite an interesting situation anyway. And, you know, whatever's happening, it is uniting a previously disunited country, where perhaps, you know, a third or a half of people were kind of, you know, on Russia's side. I really don't get that impression anymore, even though I know the Western media is very selective in what it broadcasts. But I've been watching so many different channels, loads of social media as well, what's been going up on social media. Again, the Enforcer channel is very good for all the little video clips people are sticking up, and he's finding them. I get the impression the Ukrainians are pretty united now, and I can think if their president is murdered, it will only unite them even more. But anyway, we watch with interest.